This is the Roman legion, the greatest military force in ancient history, and the basis for every professional army since. But just how did the citizens of a small Italian town come to conquer the world?
This time on Conquest, how to win with the weapons of Rome. Team, this is going to be tough. We're going to put you in Roman armor, give you Roman equipment, and train you to fight with the weapons and tactics of the legionary. But it's not just about combat. It's about getting into the mindset of the Roman soldier. His absolute confidence in victory, his refusal to accept defeat. We're going to make you invincible. And then, for your final challenge, we're going to send you into battle against the barbarians. Welcome to the Roman army.
In the early days of Rome, army service was compulsory for every Roman citizen who held property. It was reasoned that these men would fight to defend their property and also fight to gain more of it. The Roman state expanded because its army was incredibly aggressive and disciplined. Each nation they defeated would be offered a chance to join the expanding empire. The Romans were hard to refuse. The alternative was annihilation. Enemy states became allies, and their soldiers became auxiliaries in the Roman army.
The Romans copied from their enemies. Weapons, armor, formations, tactics, anything that worked. This is mail armor, copied from the Celts and in use throughout the Roman period. You could stab through mail, but it would withstand a cut. Only problem was a really hard blow would break the bone beneath it. So, from the 1st century AD, the Roman legionary wore this, the lorica segmentata. This was made of curved iron plates, and it gave absolutely brilliant protection to the body and to the shoulders. The helmets were of many styles, but the same basic design, with this strengthening piece across the forehead, with these extra eyebrows here. Sometimes crossbars reinforced the whole skull. These cheek pieces protected the face, and the whole helmet gave you excellent vision, and these ear slots allowed you to hear. It was vital to be able to hear commands in the Roman army. Turn to face me. There's also this very large neck guard. If I cut down at your head, your natural instinct is to turn away and hunch up. And as you do that, that neck guard comes down, slides over the shoulder to protect your neck and shoulders. The Roman legionary was a valuable investment. You were worth protecting. Team, get into your armor.
Around 100 BC, the Roman general Marius reorganized the legion. First, he opened it to all Roman citizens, whether they held property or not. They would be a permanent standing army of paid soldiers. Many new recruits couldn't afford their own armor and weapons, and these had to be supplied by the state. So for the first time, military equipment became standardized.
Weapons. First, the shield, the scutum. This was made like plywood, strips of wood glued together, made into shape, covered with linen and leather, with a boss and edging of bronze or iron. Now this was shaped to curve around the body. It's over ½ an inch thick, and until you get used to it, it's heavy. Next, the pilum. This is the javelin, the Roman throwing spear. You'll have 2 of these, one light and one heavy. Around your waist, you're wearing a cingulum. Here, around the parts that you might wish to use after the battle. Also on the belt is this, the Roman pugio, a stabbing dagger. This will punch its way through just about anything. On a baldric from the shoulder hangs your sword. Now this is on the right hip, so that you can draw it without it getting caught up in your shield. This is the gladius hispaniensis. It's a sword copied from the Celts of Spain. This was the sword which won an empire. Legionaries, take up your helmets, your shields, and your javelins.
There is a problem with every well-equipped army. It's followed by a baggage train, which moves very slowly and needs lots of protection. The Roman general Marius reduced it in size. Now each squad of 8 men was allowed 1 mule to carry a tent, millstones, and extra supplies. Everything else was to be carried by the legionary.
Are you ready to go?
Yeah!
No, you're not. Every legionary needs one of these. A pole with a crosspiece. On this you will have a cloak, a bedroll, mess tins, water bottle, between 3 and 15 days of supplies, and any personal kit, such as a writing tablet and toilet paper. In addition, each of you will carry at least one of the following: a wicker basket, a bucket, a chain, an adze, a hatchet, and stakes. Also, a shovel, an entrenching tool, a turf cutter, and this, a delabra, the Roman pickaxe, because the Roman soldier was also a builder.
The average Roman soldier was short, strong, and extremely fit. They had to be. Every night on campaign, the legion would spend up to 2 hours building a fortified camp, digging a ditch and a parapet, and putting their stakes on top of it to form a palisade. They slept well and safely, and the next day, if things went badly, they had a camp ready to come back to. The soldiers worked in full armor, while others protected them. If they were attacked, they were ready to defend themselves immediately.
The legion had to be able to march 24 miles in 5 hours, and believe me, that is fast. So in your first hour, you lot should easily be able to cover 50 lengths of this field, which is just under 5 miles.
We gotta march?
No way. When do we get to use the weapons?
This soldier has just disobeyed an order. The Roman army is held together by discipline. So you lot will all march with full weapons, but you will march with full kit. Romans were usually outnumbered, but they had excellent communications and a superb road system. It was vital to get the legions rapidly to wherever the trouble was. And these guys could march faster than any other foot soldier.
Even in peacetime, a legionary had to route march 3 times a month in full kit, which weighed between 80 and 100 pounds. The legionaries called themselves after the name of the general who thought up this brilliant idea, Marius's mules.
Team, halt! Fall out. Pathetic. How's the morale?
Oh, it's great.
So it should be. This is an army of professional long-service soldiers, well-paid, fully equipped, excellent health and welfare benefits, and a good pension after 25 years of service, although, of course, you weren't allowed to marry.
Ah, you're kidding.
Well, you've got other things to think about. You're about to meet your new centurion.
Centurions were the drill sergeants of their day. They ran the Roman army with extreme discipline and were often more feared than the enemy.
Parete star, star. Ad gladium, cleaner.
One particularly nasty fellow was nicknamed Give Me Another for his practice of breaking his staff over his soldiers' backs.
Gentlemen, this is the 6th Legion Victrix. And here is Dave Michaels, also known as Flavius Crispus, your new centurion. Flavius, these men are tired and they are hungry, so perhaps just an hour of drill before lunch?
With this sorry-looking lot, at least an hour. Parate, mue! Mue! See it?
The legion was made up of about 4,800 fighting men, plus about 1,000 support staff. It was divided into 10 cohorts. The first cohort was extra large, while the other 9 were each made up of 6 centuries. The century was the basic tactical unit and contained about 80 men under a centurion. Each unit broke down further into teams of 8 men who shared a tent. Discipline in the Roman army was swift and brutal. Any regiment that showed cowardice in battle faced decimation. Today, we take that word to mean an overwhelming destruction of an army's ranks. But to the Romans who invented it, it meant killing 1 out of every 10 soldiers in a regiment that required discipline. The most famous act of decimation took place during the slave uprising of 73 BC, led by the gladiator Spartacus. 2 legions who lost to Spartacus in battle were duly decimated by their commanders. So there was ample incentive for soldiers to train hard and perform well in battle. On the battlefield, units had to move around each other and support each other with speed and discipline. There was a complex system of commands by various types of trumpet. Some designed to be heard at a great distance over the noise of battle. There were also visual cues. Each century, cohort, and the legion itself had a standard which it followed. These were considered sacred objects. and the loss of a standard was an unbearable disgrace.
Vendetta captate, pick up your shield. Ad testudenam, moe.
It was essential for every man to learn the battlefield commands and movements. This one is the testudo, or tortoise, mainly used for siege warfare.
Moe.
At last, our team is ready for the next stage. They have the equipment, the discipline, and an understanding of drill and tactics. More important, they have the weapons. Next, they learn to use them. Our team has learnt the basics of drill and discipline in the Roman legion. Now it's time to fight.
You have to understand the fighting spirit of the Romans. They were entirely aggressive. Even when they were attacked themselves, they moved forward into the attack. They took the fight to the enemy. Now, they had big shields. These weren't to hide behind. These were offensive weapons. Step forward. I'm going to walk through you. Try and stop me. You take my point. And look at the armor. The Romans had the technology to cover the entire body in articulated armor. They chose not to, because with the lorica segmentata, you could run. And I don't mean backwards. Your first weapon is the pilum. This is a short-range weapon. Very heavy, deadly, brilliantly designed. A rain of these would come down on the front ranks of the enemy. And if he was unarmored, he'd be dead. If he had just a weak shield, this point would break through it, and the metal shaft would continue through and pin the man behind it. If he had a heavy shield, well, this point would stick in the wood, and this shaft was designed to bend on impact, making the shield completely useless. This wasn't a defensive weapon to hold an enemy off. It was a vicious, aggressive tool for killing. The pilum was just to soften them up. The Roman legion was a machine with 5,000 blades, and the gladius was the blade. It's unusual to be able to hold a weapon in your hand and know that this changed the world. And it's so simple. Why this weapon when the Romans had so many other choices? I'll show you. With a long sword, you need lots of room to be able to wield it effectively, which is hopeless for formation fighting. You could use a shield with it, but the shield had to be small and held in one hand. And most importantly, wielding this can be very, very tiring. Now, there is an alternative, the falcata. Now, this was used by the Greeks and the Spanish Celts. It's extremely heavy and very effective. Step forward. But in close combat, you had only one real stroke with this, the downward chop. And every time you raise it to make your attack, he'd stab you. Now, the gladius. Step forward. The Romans knew how to cut with this weapon, to clear an opponent's blade, or to attack the head, the shoulders, or the arm. But they also knew this was a complete waste of time. This weapon is designed for thrusting. Here I am, tucked in behind my shield. I can push forwards, but it's very hard to push me back in this position, and my gladius is at the level of his stomach. If I stab forwards, I'll hit him in the guts, in the testicles, or the femoral artery at the top of the thigh. There's just a chance that he may parry my incoming thrust. Then I stab upwards to the throat, the face, or the eyes. It's almost impossible to avoid at this range, because the crucial thing about this attack is speed. You use your arm like a piston. Stab, 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 stab. It's completely simple, absolutely brutal, and you will practice it repeatedly.
Romans trained for 6 months before being accepted into the legion. They had to be able to read and write to understand written orders. Aside from learning the commands, formations, drill and marching, they spent hours on weapon technique. Throwing the pilum and using wooden swords of double the standard weight to build up their strength. They practiced against each other and against a pella, a thick wooden pole as high as a man.
In close order combat, each man is given 3 feet of space. You are not bunched up. Your shields are not overlapping. You have to give the gladius room to do its work. The weapon is short, aggressive. You have to get in close. Let's see the machine in action. Ready? Advance!
You can see why some have described the advancing Roman legion as a many-toothed barracuda.
You have to know what weapons you're up against and how to defeat them. Over there is a group of warriors. behind a wall of shields and spears. First thing is, you're going to do serious damage with your pilum. They're closely packed together, and they cannot raise their shields above their heads. That's your first weapon. When you make contact, this is what you do. Step forward, step forward. I want you to fix those spears with your shields. Move in. I'm in the rank behind you, and I'm going to force my way between you, push my way through, hack and chop at these spears until I get close enough. These guys don't stand a chance. Here are two heavy weapons used against the Legion, the falx and the axe. Either of these can carve straight through your helmet. But if you just sit back and defend yourself, I will hack you to pieces. What you have to do with this is attack. So as I come in, you have to attack with your shield held high. Do it! Good! Because I have to use two hands, I'm a good target. The longsword is more difficult. I have a longer reach than you, so you have to keep driving me back. Push me onto my back foot. Do it! Don't let me have room to use this thing. That's it! Keep advancing! That's right! And remember, you can stab me 3 times for every cut I can give you.
To help meet the many types of enemy they had to face, the Romans used large numbers of auxiliary forces. These would be light infantry, cavalry, archers. These soldiers were paid less than the legionary, but after 25 years' service, they and their families could become Roman citizens, entitled to all the privileges and protections that went along with that. The auxiliaries were good soldiers, but the battles were won by the heavy infantry foot soldier of the legion. It's time to try some of the techniques we've learnt with a full-scale attack. In 2 disciplined ranks, our team charges forward. After only a small amount of training, the effect is already obvious. The enemy front line would be devastated by a hail of pila just seconds before the Romans smashed into them and cut them to pieces with the sword. As the enemy were bunched up, the Roman rear ranks would throw their pila over their own front ranks into the densely packed mass.
It was a mincing machine, and all it takes to start a rout is for one man to break and run, and it won't be a Roman.
I feel great. I feel pumped. I feel like I could tear into a real army, not just hay bales now.
Lots of speed, shock, and violence. We just tore right through them.
But what would it be like against a real enemy? At last, our own legionaries are ready to face the final test, the barbarians. For their final challenge, our team is faced with a group of barbarians forming a shield wall against them. Both sides are using real weapons, but a well-thrown pilum could kill with ease. So we have substituted bales of hay for our frontline barbarians.
Gentlemen, your hour has come. There is your enemy. You will charge the hay bales, throw your pila. You will then go through the hay bales and make contact with the barbarian force beyond. Are you ready? Attack!
The team throw their pila with devastating accuracy. They cut through the hay bales and reform to face the enemy. The barbarians charge towards them. The shields smash together. And our team starts pushing, jabbing, and thrusting. Although outnumbered, they break through the shield wall. Once they're on the run, the barbarians are easy targets. Our team has the discipline not to chase too far and to maintain formation. Bodies litter the ground, including some of ours.
Well, you took a few casualties. Do you think you did well? Yeah! Not well enough. There's another barbarian force at the top of the hill, including archers. Marching orders! Fast, come on!
The barbarian archers are guarding a fortification. To succeed, our team must breach the wall and eliminate the enemy force. Our team marches to meet the barbarians, who let fly with a volley of arrows. The team forms a testudo under a hail of arrows and marches slowly forward. The archers keep firing. Like an armored tank, the testudo advances unscathed towards the enemy line. Suddenly, our team changes formation. They begin the attack with swords and shields. This time, things are not so easy. Our team is exhausted. The barbarians fight as individual warriors, while our team back each other up and work together. Although the barbarians fight viciously, they are no match for our superior Roman weapons strategy and training. At last, our team mounts the fortification and can now rain blows down on the defenders. The wall is breached. The barbarians cut and run to the relative safety of the forest, perhaps to fight another day.
Well done, you look exhausted. Yeah. But you gained the victory, and for the Romans, that's all that mattered. Our team has shown that on the right terrain, confident, well-trained, disciplined, the Roman legion was the finest fighting force in the world. We have learnt how to win with the weapons of Rome.
If we want to learn about the exploits of some of the earliest warriors and the weapons they fought with, we need only look in the Bible. The Old Testament gives a detailed military history of the 12 tribes of the Israelites and their fight for survival.
This time on conquest, the experience, the weapons of the Bible.
The lands of the Bible are squeezed between the Mediterranean Sea and the desert. To the north is Syria and Asia Minor. To the south, Egypt. To the east, the empires of Mesopotamia. This area used to be called the land of Canaan. It's only 70 miles wide, and it's absolutely essential in a strategic position as the sole land bridge between Eurasia and Africa. In times of peace, it was essential for commerce. In wartime, essential for military maneuver. The Israelites controlled most of this land for most of 12 centuries. We're going to find out how they did it, and you are going to learn how to win with the weapons of the Bible.
In the 18th century BCE, there was a great movement of peoples from the east into the eastern Mediterranean, of which the major group were the Hyksos. They invaded Egypt and defeated the mighty Egyptian army, who were equipped with inferior weapons of stone, wood, and early bronze.
The Hyksos succeeded partly by military technology. They had superior bronze weapons and the ultimate shock force of fast chariots, and an excellent missile weapon, the Asiatic composite bow. Now, this was of recurved design, made of horn and sinew, with an effective range of 200 yards. The only disadvantage of this was that it was extremely difficult and expensive to make, and often took up to a year to finish. Now, these modern copies are 55 pounds draw weight, which is extremely strong for a small bow, and so strong, in fact, I'm going to need help stringing it. So, could you give me a push? Now, these were truly powerful weapons. From now on, massed archery ruled the battlefield. So, you'd better learn how to use these.
Archery was so effective in this period because good armor was rare. Most was of stiffened cloth or leather, sometimes strengthened with scales of bronze, with helmets of hardened leather or bronze. Eventually, Egypt expelled the Hyksos by copying the weapons of their enemies, especially the bow and the chariot. By the time of the New Kingdom in Egypt, the Israelites were treated as a hostile population. Sometime during the 13th century BCE, they were led out of bondage in Egypt by their leader, Moses. Later, under Joshua, they began the conquest of the land of Canaan.
At this time, the Israelites were still nomadic. They were a collection of individual Bronze Age warriors. They fought with a spear and javelin, bows and slings, clubs, many types of axes, swords and shields. These are the classic weapons of the ancient period, but what's important is what they were made of. Now, they still used flint and stone, warheads and blades, And these could be extremely sharp, but they had to be short, and they often shattered on impact. The best blades were made of metal. First metal blades were made of copper, but this is an extremely soft material. But if you take 7 parts copper to 1 part of tin, you get an alloy called bronze. Now here's a nice new shiny bronze axe head. This was a very much harder material and could take a good edge, but you still had to be careful with it. It was brittle, and it could blunt very easily. And in the Middle East, bronze was often of poor quality because of the rarity of tin. But it made some good weapons. Right, team, it's time we learned how to use these bronze weapons. And the one thing you won't be doing with them is any kind of Hollywood swordplay, like this. Bronze weapons simply will not stand up to this. These are modern steel copies. Let's look at the real thing. First, with a long sword. It's absolutely pointless to try and think of any kind of cuts against bronze armor or bronze shields. All you're going to do is blunt your sword. Also, you're not going to be able to take any kind of parry. If you thrust at me, there's a good chance that your sword or mine will break, so don't allow your sword to be cut down onto. Now, these aren't useless weapons, but you just have to rethink your whole idea of swordplay. You push shield against shield, and you try and find the gaps, the unarmored places on the body, low on the leg, up to the face, into the gut. Now, there were various different types of swords called kopesh. Now, these are based on an Egyptian design. It's almost impossible to believe that this sort of sword was actually used, but they're shown throughout antiquity, so they must have been used somehow. One like this would certainly be used as a cutting, slashing weapon. I would try and smash your shield aside and then come in with a head cut to smash right through it, cleave through it, and through you. Now, the bronze spearhead meant that the spear could really come into its own as a fighting weapon. Spear fighting technique is a whole technique to itself. There's all kinds of thrusts and parries. If you parry too far out, don't, because I can come under and in. Now, the short spear, the javelin, the bronze head made it a much more effective weapon. It made it much better balanced and a much deadlier weapon. Now, there were many different types of axe. Everything from this double-handed monster to this nice, short, sharp one. Now, with this, it does have a sharp blade, but frankly, that's not important with this. This one relies on weight. You try and cleave through your opponent's shield or armor. Now, I'm going to cut at you. I want you to try and hit back at me, all right? Very good. Not finished yet. Yeah, you're too good at this. Go away.
From around 9000 BCE began the process we call civilization. Settled agricultural states were established, and the ownership of land became important for the first time.
Defense of the land and the new possibilities for trade led to the creation of the first walled cities and to the formation of the first semi-professional armies. Now, you guys will be armed with short swords or axes, with spears and with shields, and with some basic armor and helmets of bronze or leather. So pick up your shields, follow me. In Sumeria, we find the earliest phalanx formation, with troops trained to fight and march together, to obey orders and to keep close formation. 1,500 years later, the Canaanites fought in much the same way. These are the troops the Israelites had to face, and these are the tactics they had to learn. Shields! Spears!
The Israelites fought with these early armies and learned from them. But their battles against the Canaanites could do little to prepare them for their next and greatest enemies. Coming up, the team learn how to win against the Philistines. Our Our team have been training with bronze weapons. But just like the Israelites, they are about to be overtaken by technology.
From around 1200 BC, a group called the Sea Peoples invaded the Middle East, probably from Asia Minor or the Aegean. Among them were the Philistines. They invaded and settled the southwest coast of Canaan, and they became mortal enemies to the Israelites. They were probably the first true swordsmen. They used a sword of about 3 foot long with a small shield that we would call a buckler. But the really important thing about these guys is that their weapons were made of iron. Now, it's difficult to understand how important and how terrifying this change was. Just imagine you have a well-equipped army with bronze weapons being absolutely carved to pieces by these new iron ones. The Israelites really had a problem.
By the mid-11th century BCE, the Philistines had beaten back the Israelites and established themselves deep into Judah. Saul was chosen to lead the Israelites, and he created a professional standing army of about 3,000 men.
We particularly remember the exploits of 2 of Saul's men. The first was his eldest son, Jonathan. Now, the Philistines were strongly encamped at a place called Mishmash. They had a small advance guard out ahead of them. Jonathan and his shield-bearer left the main Israelite army and skirted around, attacked the advance guard, and routed it. Just the 2 of them.
You gotta be kidding.
Well, no, you mustn't underestimate the effect of a surprise attack. You see your friends falling all around you, you run away, you have to tell everyone we've just been attacked by a huge force. The main Philistine camp is thrown into confusion. They begin to retreat. The retreat becomes a rout.
So, how many people were in the advance guard?
Well, we don't know, but probably around 20.
We're supposed to believe that 2 defeated 20.
There's no way.
Well, maybe there is a way. We have to look at the idea of Jonathan and his shield-bearer. There's a lot of mention of the shield-bearer in ancient texts. Now, this guy may just have been a slave to carry his master's heaviest piece of equipment. But what if he wasn't? What if he was part of an active team of 2? Now, most soldiers have the same problem. Only part of their mind is focused on aggressive intent. The other part is thinking about defense, about survival. This immediately cuts his aggressive effectiveness by 50% or more. And every soldier he meets has the same priorities. But what if you trusted someone enough to rely on him entirely for your defense? That would mean that you could get rid of your own shield and concentrate entirely on attack. Now, if you guys train together effectively, you can make a really great fighting team.
I think if you had a lot of time to practice, you could fight like this really well. But you'd have to work together for a long period of time to get in perfectly in tune.
Yeah, I agree. Together, I could see how this could be a very deadly combo, but a lot of time and energy. You'd almost have to be, brothers in a sense.
They were pretty well guarded a lot of the time, and when you were trying to attack one, the other one always seemed to get you.
Yeah, we really had a tough time trying to synchronize our attack. We had to really work together in order to separate them. Lateral movement, kind of flanking movements worked real well against them.
It's time for you guys to learn one of the oldest and simplest weapons ever invented, and one of the most difficult to master, the sling. We have 2 types. This is the heavy sling. It throws a large rock a remarkably long distance. This is particularly useful in siege warfare and against closely packed masses of troops. The lighter version throws a much smaller stone. Now, these little stones can go with amazing accuracy and speed. The stone goes inside the cup of the sling. The loop of the sling is placed over these 3 fingers, and the loose end is held between the thumb and forefinger. Now, there are various techniques for throwing. You can either throw underhand or overhand. The classic method is to swing it around the head. When you reach the right speed, you release.
In certain cultures, and among all sheep-rearing societies, the sling was taught to every boy from childhood. It kept wolves away from the sheep, and of course it was always an excellent weapon of war. But the most effective weapon of the period was the war chariot.
Now, we keep on hearing about chariots, and we know exactly what they look like, because some have actually survived from New Kingdom Egypt. This is a modern reproduction. The originals were incredibly light, only 77 pounds. They had a great range for those days of up to 37 miles per day, and the closing speed in battle was 24 miles per hour. Now, these chariots were mostly with 2 horses and 2 riders. One was the driver, you, Scott. You would hold those reins in your right hand, because in your left hand, you'd hold that shield. Now, that was to protect the really important guy, Chris, who was the archer. Now, you'd be lashed on into position to give you the stability required to shoot your bow. The chariot itself was packed with masses of quivers full of arrows and loads of javelins for throwing at short range.
This whole setup was incredibly expensive. Think of a $4.3 million M1A1 Abrams tank. There was the archer, who would either be a nobleman or a first-class professional soldier, his bow, scale armor and equipment. The charioteer was also a highly skilled professional. The horses would also often be armored, requiring a huge staff to breed, train and feed them.
But why was the chariot so important when it contains only one archer? Well, the trick is that it combines the 2 classic capabilities of infantry, shock and missile capability. The bows the charioteers used were of the highest quality, far better than any used by the common soldier.
Let's go!
Yeah!
The chariot could run rings around infantry formations, attacking them in the flank and in the rear, always keeping out of range. If the infantry did try to charge them down, well, the chariot just ran away and you could shoot backwards, hit them as they came on. When the infantry fled, you could easily catch them up and ride them down. They were excellent for scouting work, for lightning raids, and for bringing back intelligence quickly. And as in open warfare, the only defense against a chariot was another chariot. Everybody wanted one.
Right, we have another test for you. Here's the chariot, and there are the horses. We're going to drive you around a circle of 4 targets. I want you to hit 3 of them with arrows, 1 of them with a javelin. Let's rock and load.
Yes, that's what I meant. The ability to shoot a bow and throw a spear from a bouncing chariot at full speed was vital. But as our team discover, the rock and roll really make the lock and load difficult, let alone actually hitting the target. But after a few tries, our team get the hang of it, and they manage to hit some targets as they sweep by. Next, our team combines the ancient skills they have learned to compete against each other using the weapons of the Bible.
Right, team, for your final challenge, we've set you a course of various combat tasks. You'll get a point for each hit, and the course will be run at a fast pace. First, you'll have a spear fight with padded spears. Then, you'll have to hit that target with arrows, javelins, and slingshot. And finally, you jump in the chariot and hit your targets on the move. Good luck.
First up, it's Chris against Scott with the padded spears. Whoever gets 2 solid strikes to their opponent's body will win the first round of the challenge.
Go!
Both men stand their ground, but in an instant they strike simultaneously and each score hits. But then Chris flies forward and gets a second solid hit to Scott's stomach.
Hit that!
In his hasty retreat, Scott sprains his ankle. This may hinder his chances in the next 2 rounds of the challenge. Next up are Dan and Dave. Both fighters are more cautious, looking for an opening. Dan uses his hand to deflect Dave's attacks and then makes a stab to his opponent's stomach. Dave's looking for revenge now and gets a hit to Dan's chest.
Good hit!
Dave blocks a shot to his face, but misses a double hit to his stomach. Dan wins 2 points in the first round to tie for the lead with Chris. Next up, it's round 2. Scott shakes off his twisted ankle and sets himself up for the second round. He scores a point with his first arrow, but misses with the second. Then loses his concentration and misses both javelins and slingshots. He's off to the third round with only 2 points. Next up is Dan. Surprisingly, he misses both shots with the bow, but makes up for it with 2 hits using the javelin. The slingshot continues to give our guys problems, as Dan misses with both stones. Dave, still sore after losing the spear fight to Dan, lines up his bow and knocks up 2 accurate hits for 2 points to get him back in the game. But then blows his chance for the lead by missing his next 3 attempts. Only a hit with his final slingshot keeps his hopes of winning alive. Chris races to his mark and immediately gets another point, then narrowly misses with his second arrow. But 2 lucky javelin hits make up for his inaccuracy with the sling, and he exits round 2 just in the lead. Scott's first up into the chariot, and immediately he's back on track with 2 hits out of 2. But then he loses his concentration and just misses the 3rd arrow target and the javelin target, worth 2 points. He ends up with only 4 points. Dan starts off well, nailing the first soldier, but then fails to knock the arrow and completely misses the second target. No excuses now, as he has plenty of time to line up the 3rd, and he gets it. But can he get the double point with his javelin? No. Dan ends up our current leader with 6 points. Dave is determined to be our latest conquest champion and starts off strong. But then he fumbles and drops his second arrow and can't recompose himself and misses the 3rd target. Only the javelin can keep him in the running. And he gets it, scoring 2 points for a total of 7 to move past Dan. Finally, Chris lashes himself to the chariot, and we're off. Chris gets the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd targets with authority, but can he get the javelin too? No. But it doesn't matter. Chris has won with 8 points and is this week's conquest champion.
The warriors of the Bible used a whole array of weapons, first of stone, then bronze, and finally iron. Our team has experimented with many different and surprising techniques of combat, as we have learned how to win with the weapons of the Bible.